They thought I was invisible. At every family dinner, my sister-in-law Vanessa made sure to remind me I didn't belong. She bragged about her designer bags, her lavish trips, her life dripping with luxury. And I sat there, smiling politely, letting her play her game. What she never imagined was that I was playing one of my own. Her last vacation, the one she flaunted with endless photos, the one she used to mock me, was inside a resort I owned. She thought I was beneath her. The truth? I was the ground she was standing on. When I first married Daniel, I thought I had finally stepped into the kind of family I used to dream about. The Millers had money, prestige, and a last name that turned heads in social circles. I imagined warmth, tradition, maybe even the comfort of finally belonging somewhere. But illusions never last long, do they? That evening, seated at their long mahogany dining table, I realized how fragile my fantasy really was. Crystal glasses chimed, the chandelier spilled golden light across polished silverware, and laughter rolled around the room like a polished performance. It should have been perfect. Yet beneath the laughter, every look seemed weighted, every smile tight with judgment. Daniel's sister, Vanessa, leaned back in her chair, her diamond bracelet catching the light. Some people just marry up, don't they? Her voice was casual, but her eyes cut across the table, landing on me with a cruel precision. A ripple of polite laughter followed, and though no one said my name, everyone knew the joke's target. I smiled politely, keeping my fork steady in my hand. I didn't flinch, didn't let the satisfaction in her eyes feed on me. Inside, though, I filed it away. Words like those are blades disguised as compliments, and she knew exactly how to twist them. Daniel chuckled awkwardly, then changed the subject, but not once did he defend me. That silence cut deeper than Vanessa's jab. A husband's laugh at your expense is the heaviest betrayal in a room full of enemies. The evening dragged on, each toast dripping with subtle dismissal. To the Millers, the legacy we've built, his father said, raising a glass, pausing just long enough for me to feel excluded. His mother nodded approvingly, her gaze brushing past me like I was furniture, not family. Later, as dessert was served, Vanessa began scrolling through her phone, a sly smile curling at her lips. "Oh, you have to see this," she said, turning the screen toward the table. Perfectly lit photos filled the feed, her on white sand beaches, cocktails balanced in her manicured hand, designer swimsuits shimmering in the sun. My last trip, Azure Haven, truly heaven on earth. She tagged Daniel, her parents, even her cousins in the captions. I noticed she skipped me, as always. It wasn't oversight, it was deliberate erasure, the subtle declaration that I wasn't part of their glittering circle. Everyone gasped, showering her with admiration. "You have the best taste, Vanessa." "That resort is impossible to book. How did you even manage it?" "Luxury suits you." I leaned forward, pretending interest, though my chest tightened for a different reason. On the bottom corner of her photo was a logo I knew too well, stylized silver waves encircled by azure light. The emblem wasn't just a resort brand, it was my brand. For a moment, the room dissolved around me. Their voices, their laughter, even Daniel's indulgent grin, it all became background noise. All I could see was that logo, bold and unmistakable, sitting on Vanessa's picture like a private joke shared only between me and the truth. She had spent her trip boasting about a place she thought belonged to her world, a luxury meant for people like her. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that every inch of that sand, every cocktail she posed with, every chandelier she captured on her Instagram stories, had been paid for, designed, and signed off by me. I placed my wine glass gently on the table, steadying my breath. Vanessa was still talking, basking in the awe of her family. "Next time, maybe I'll take all of you. We could really show the world how the Millers vacation." Her smug grin widened. Daniel laughed again, his hand brushing mine, unaware of the storm brewing behind my smile. And me. I smiled back, soft, calm, unbothered, at least on the surface, but my eyes told a different story, cold, deliberate, sharp. A game had been set in motion, and unlike Vanessa, I already knew the ending. In the Miller household, I had perfected the role of the quiet outsider. I nodded when spoken to, smiled when mocked, and absorbed every backhanded compliment like it was harmless air. They thought silence meant weakness. They thought endurance meant ignorance. What they didn't realize was that silence can also be a weapon, and endurance the sharpest disguise. The morning after Vanessa's little performance at dinner, I played the dutiful wife. I poured Daniel's coffee, packed his files for work, and kissed him goodbye at the door. He smiled, distracted, already checking his emails, oblivious to the fact that the woman he dismissed at the table was about to chair a meeting worth millions. By noon, I was in a glass-walled boardroom high above the city skyline. The air hummed with quiet power. International partners in tailored suits, polished presentations glowing on digital screens, assistants waiting on every word. Madam Miller, the lead investor addressed me, your vision for the expansion has exceeded our projections. Heads around the table nodded. I gave them a measured smile, authoritative and steady. A different woman than the one my in-laws thought they knew. 2 worlds, 1 mask. In one, I was invisible. In the other, I was untouchable. I excused myself after the meeting, stepping into my private office where the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the harbor. My phone buzzed. A message from the resort manager. The Wilsons have just checked into your suite. My heart gave a sharp, almost amused kick. Vanessa, Daniel, his parents, all of them now standing under a roof I owned. I leaned back in my chair, imagining them strutting into the lobby, Vanessa tossing her hair as she demanded the best treatment. And she would get it, because I told my staff she must, but the joke was hers, not mine. The plan started small, almost playful. I instructed the concierge to upgrade their rooms to the most extravagant suites, have champagne delivered with handwritten cards signed, with compliments from the house. Vanessa would drink every drop, believing it was her charm that unlocked such privilege. By evening, my phone lit up again. Vanessa had gone live on Instagram. She twirled in the marble lobby, flashing the decor behind her like a crown jewel. When you're VIP, the world bends to you, she purred into the camera. Thousands watched, showering her with likes and envious comments. She beamed, drunk on digital validation. I watched in silence, then tapped the heart icon myself. A small smirk curved my lips as I typed into the comment box. Some crowns are borrowed, not earned. My words vanished into the sea of comments, unnoticed by her, but enough to satisfy my private rebellion. The family followed her lead, posting photos of rooftop dinners, luxury spas, and exclusive lounges. Every angle, every pose, every boast carried a secret irony. The viewers saw Vanessa as a goddess of indulgence, but I saw her as a fool parading in my kingdom. Days passed like this. Vanessa basking in attention, Daniel laughing along, my in-laws soaking up the illusion of superiority. And me? I stayed behind the curtain, watching, orchestrating, calculating. My patience stretched like a bowstring, taut and ready. Then it happened. One of Vanessa's live sessions ended abruptly, but a snippet leaked online. Grainy, shaky footage caught by someone in the background. The video spread like wildfire. In it, Vanessa posed grandly in the lobby, demanding the staff call her by name. But just before the feed cut, the camera caught a bellhop bowing low to me in the corner, his voice clear. "Welcome back, owner." The clip was short, but the damage irreversible. Within hours, it was everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, gossip forums, comments exploded. "Owner, did anyone else catch that?" Wait, isn't that her sister-in-law? So Vanessa's flexing in her resort? Vanessa had no idea the storm brewing outside her curated bubble. She scrolled, laughed, and preened, while her audience began to piece the puzzle together. And me? I closed my phone, leaned back in my chair, and let the weight of inevitability sink in. The game was no longer just between us. The world had been invited to watch. The morning began with the faint shimmer of sunlight spilling through the curtains of the suite where the Wilsons stayed, unaware that every inch of marble, every chandelier, every polished detail bore my signature. I had decided it was time to move from silence into performance. A stage must be set before the truth takes its bow. I called the resort's general manager and arranged a special tour for my in-laws. They were told it was an exclusive privilege for distinguished guests, something reserved for people of influence. Of course, Vanessa seized the opportunity like a prize she alone had won. "This is what happens when you know the right people," she told her parents with a smug smile, flipping her hair as she stepped into the elevator. "Connections open doors." Daniel smiled faintly, his arm brushing against mine, completely convinced by her confidence. In the conference room, the general manager stood waiting with a team of senior staff. Vanessa strutted forward as if she belonged, as if she was the reason everyone was gathered. "This is my family," she announced, "and I think you'll find we're exactly the kind of people you want representing your brand." The staff remained polite, but their eyes flicked toward me. I kept my expression carefully neutral, hands folded in front of me, heart steady like a drum that knew its rhythm. "Ah," the manager said, finally turning. "Shall we proceed, madam?" The word cut through the air like a blade. For a heartbeat, no one moved, no one even breathed. Vanessa's proud grin faltered, her mascara-lined eyes darting between the manager and me. Daniel's brow furrowed, confusion spreading across his face. "Madam," he echoed, his voice low, uncertain. "What is going on here, Claire?" The silence in the room thickened, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioner. I gave nothing away, only the faintest tilt of my head, the kind a queen might allow when recognized in court. It was the beginning of the collapse. That evening, the storm broke open. My mother-in-law cornered me in the lounge, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You deceived us," she hissed. "You sat at our table, accepted our food, our name, while hiding who you really are. What kind of woman does that?" I met her fury with calm. The kind of woman who wanted to be loved for more than money. Her face flushed crimson, her voice rising high enough to draw stares from nearby guests. Daniel stepped in, trying to mediate, but the anger in his eyes was directed at me. "You could have told me," he said, jaw tight. "Why did you let me sit there blind while my family mocked you?" "I wanted to see if you would defend me," I answered softly, "but you never did." Before the conversation could turn private, Vanessa's voice pierced the air. She had her phone out, live streaming with her signature smugness. "You guys," she told her audience of thousands, "I just discovered the craziest family drama. Apparently my sister-in-law has been keeping some interesting secrets." She turned the camera toward me, panning slowly as if unveiling a villain. I didn't move, didn't flinch. Let her record. Let the world see. What Vanessa didn't realize was that the world had been waiting for a reveal like this. Comments began flooding her screen in real time. "Wait, isn't that the owner? Didn't someone leak a video already? So she's the real boss? OMG." The chat scrolled faster, the tone shifting from admiration for Vanessa to fascination with me. Vanessa's triumphant smile wilted as she caught the shift. Her hands shook slightly as she held the phone, desperately trying to steer the narrative back to herself. But it was too late. Clips spread like fire across platforms, edited and re-uploaded within minutes. The hashtag, Jacques your rich sister-in-law, surged to the top of trending charts, mocking Vanessa's arrogance. People weren't laughing with her anymore. They were laughing at her. Daniel grabbed the phone from her hand, snapping, "Stop this!" But the damage was done. The world had been invited into our family's dining room of secrets, and they weren't leaving. I stood in the center of it all, calm, steady, watching the empire of illusion crumble around me. For once, I didn't have to speak. The truth was performing beautifully on its own. By the next morning, the story was everywhere. Headlines screamed across every major outlet. The invisible owner of Azure Haven finally revealed. My name, once a quiet footnote in marriage papers, now dominated the news cycle. Some articles praised me as a visionary, a woman who had built an empire from shadows. Others twisted it into scandal. Was she hiding wealth to deceive her husband's family? Was this all a calculated trap? Cameras swarmed the resort, guests craned their necks, and whispers trailed me wherever I walked. The anonymity I had once protected so fiercely was gone, replaced by a spotlight that burned bright and merciless. When the press conference was called, I didn't flinch. I walked to the podium with the steady grace of someone who had been underestimated too long. Flashes burst like fireworks. Voices shouted questions I didn't answer yet. I placed my hands on the wood, waited for silence, and let the weight of the moment stretch. I was silent long enough, I said, my voice carrying through the crowded hall. Now let me tell my story. The room stilled. Reporters leaned forward, pens poised, cameras zoomed closer. I spoke of work, sacrifice, late nights building an empire while the world dismissed me as ordinary. I explained the philosophy behind Azure Haven, not just luxury, but sanctuary. I didn't speak of Vanessa's taunts or my mother-in-law's scorn. I didn't have to. The contrast between their voices and mine was proof enough. But outside, the public split down the middle. Half applauded, flooding social media with admiration. Finally, a woman proving you don't need their approval. The other half sneered, accusing me of deceit. Why marry into money if you already had it? Why hide? The debate became a spectacle, and for the first time, my family name was no longer theirs alone. It was mine. The fallout came swiftly. Vanessa, once adored online for her glamorous posts, became the subject of ridicule. Memes sprouted overnight, mocking her boasts with captions like, "When you flex but forget it's not yours." She deleted videos, blocked critics, but nothing stopped the avalanche. Every photo she had ever posted from Azure Haven was now evidence of her foolishness. My mother-in-law, queen of her social circles, found herself snubbed. Invitations to luncheons dried up. Polite smiles turned into whispers behind fans. Her empire of social power, built on pedigree and appearances, cracked under the weight of exposure. People who once clung to her now distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with the woman who failed to recognize the diamond in her own family. And Daniel, poor, prideful Daniel, was painted in headlines as the husband who didn't know. Critics laughed at him, calling him a man living in his wife's shadow, a dependent draped in borrowed dignity. The ridicule cut him deeper than anything I had ever said. He avoided my gaze, his jaw tight, his silence louder than words. I let it all unfold. I didn't raise my voice, didn't gloat, didn't strike. My revenge wasn't in words. It was in letting truth expose itself. And yet, I knew I needed something more. The opportunity came at a charity gala held at the resort itself. The same hall where my family once paraded their superiority was now packed with journalists, donors, and socialites, eager to see what the invisible queen would do next. As the speeches ended, I stepped onto the stage, not in sequins or diamonds, but in a simple black dress. The room quieted. I announced the launch of a scholarship fund for the resort's employees, maids, bellhops, cooks, the very people who had bowed and scraped while my in-laws demanded more champagne. The strength of an empire, I said, is not measured by the arrogance of those who sit at its tables, but by the dignity of those who serve them. Gasps filled the room. Some clapped immediately, others after hesitation, but all eyes turned toward my family in the front row. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably, her face pale. My mother-in-law froze, lips pressed thin. Daniel stared at me as if he'd never seen me before. I didn't look at them. I looked at the staff standing along the walls, their eyes glistening, their hands pressed to their mouths in disbelief. That moment was for them, not for the Millers. The applause grew into a roar, not for my wealth, not for my marriage, but for what I chose to do with power. I hadn't humiliated them with insults. I had outclassed them with grace. And as the clapping rose around me, I realized the fire wasn't just consuming them. It was remaking me. The glow of applause from the gala hadn't yet faded when the walls of my own marriage began to crack. Daniel waited until the cameras were gone, until the last guest had left, before cornering me in the suite. His eyes burned with something I hadn't seen before. Not admiration, not even anger, but wounded pride. "Why didn't you trust me with the truth?" His voice was low, sharp. "You let me stand there like a fool while everyone else laughed at me." The words stung because they carried fragments of truth, but also because they twisted the knife of my deepest disappointment. I steadied myself, choosing honesty over defense. "Because you never stood up for me when they tore me down," I said quietly. "You laughed when they mocked me, Daniel. You looked away when I needed you most. How could I trust you with the part of me I guard the most?" His mouth opened, then closed, as if he couldn't decide which wound to address first. Finally, he shook his head, retreating into silence. That silence stretched into days, heavy and suffocating. Our home, once filled with laughter and routine, grew cold. Meals passed without words, the sound of silverware louder than conversation. He slept in the guest room, then eventually, not at all. One evening I came home to find his closet half empty, his suitcase by the door, and on the nightstand, gleaming in the faint light, his wedding band. The click of the door shutting behind him was softer than a whisper, but it carried the weight of betrayal. I wanted to cry, but the tears refused to come. I had fought too long, endured too much, to let grief break me now. Yet the emptiness he left behind was undeniable. My victory had cost me the man I once loved, and perhaps the future I thought we could build together. But the war was not finished. As Daniel vanished from my side, another figure stepped out of the shadows, my mother-in-law. She had always worn her cruelty in polite smiles, but now she sharpened it into weapons. "She thinks money makes her one of us," I overheard her whisper at a luncheon, her voice dripping with disdain. "She thinks she can buy a family, buy respect, but everyone knows she only used her fortune to trap my son." The rumors spread quickly, in clubs, in charity circles, in whispered conversations behind manicured hands. Invitations stopped arriving in my inbox. My name was no longer spoken with admiration, but with suspicion. The very circles my in-laws worshipped began to close ranks against me, not because they believed her lies, but because scandal always stinks, and no one wanted to reek of it. What had once been a family battle was now a public one. The narrative was no longer mine to control. It belonged to gossip, to envy, to the puppeteer who had always pulled strings from the shadows. I confronted her once, in her grand sitting room, where portraits of ancestors loomed like silent judges. "Why?" I demanded. "What do you gain from tearing me down?" Her lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer. "Control, Claire. That is what you never understood. This family bends around me, and now it will bend you, or break you." It was not rage I felt, but clarity. She had never hated me for who I was. She had hated me for what I could become. And now that the world knew my power, she was determined to reduce it, piece by piece, until I was just another woman destroyed by whispers. The final blow came in the form of an ultimatum, delivered through Daniel himself. He returned one night, not as my husband, but as my mother-in-law's messenger. His voice was hollow, mechanical. "She wants you to walk away from the company," he said, not meeting my eyes. "She says, if you don't, you'll lose me for good." I studied him, the man I once thought would protect me. Now he stood before me as a shadow, a pawn. "So it's her or me," I said, my voice steady. He flinched, but didn't deny it. For the first time, I saw the chains around him as clearly as the ones she tried to fasten around me, and I knew then this battle was no longer about family, it was about survival. The ultimatum hung over me like smoke, but instead of choking, I felt something loosen. For too long, I had measured myself by their approval. Daniel's laugh, his family's sneers, the world's judgment. But when the final demand came, when they asked me to trade my freedom for their acceptance, I realized I was done bargaining. One evening, I drove to the coast, where the ocean stretched endless and unbroken. The salt air clung to my skin. The waves roared with the kind of honesty no human voice could carry. I slipped the wedding ring from my finger, feeling its weight one last time before setting it in my palm. A single breath, and I bent low, letting the tide claim it. The gold vanished beneath the water, swallowed by something larger than both of us. I stood there, barefoot on the sand, the wind pulling my hair into chaos, and for the first time in years, I wasn't anyone's wife, anyone's daughter-in-law, anyone's object of pity. I was mine. Days later, I signed a different kind of contract. The founding papers of a charitable trust in my own name. A fund dedicated to helping women caught in the same traps I had endured. Underestimated, silenced, dismissed. The pen didn't just scratch across paper, it carved a line in history. I was not merely surviving their rejection. I was building something greater from it. And so began a new order. The trust grew quickly, fueled by my resources and a vision people wanted to believe in. I visited shelters, universities, workplaces, speaking to women who had been told they were less than, and handing them the keys to opportunity. Each smile, each tear, each spark of gratitude filled the hollow places Daniel's departure had left. Vanessa, meanwhile, faded from sight. Her followers dwindled. Her name became synonymous with arrogance. She deleted her accounts, retreating into silence, consumed not by scandal but by shame. Once she had strutted on the stage of vanity, now she was just another spectator of the legacy she could never touch. My mother-in-law clung to her crumbling empire, her whispers losing their power as the tide of public opinion shifted. Those who once bowed to her authority now turned to me, not because I demanded it, but because I had proven what real strength looked like. It was Daniel's return that surprised me most. Months after he left, he appeared at my office, thinner, wearier, carrying the weight of regret in his eyes. "Claire," he said softly, "I was wrong. I should have stood by you. I want to make it right." For a fleeting second, I saw the boy I once loved, the man I once believed in. But that boy was gone, and the man before me was too late. I smiled, not cruelly, but with the kind of calm that comes from finally knowing who you are. "I don't need saving," I told him. "I am the storm." Nolan's shoulders sagged, and he nodded, perhaps realizing the truth. I had risen beyond the reach of his shadow. The climax came months later, at a global summit on leadership. I walked onto a stage bathed in light, the weight of 1,000 eyes fixed on me. Cameras broadcasted my every step, but I felt no fear. Behind me, the screen displayed my foundation's emblem. Before me, a sea of faces, leaders, activists, ordinary people hungry for hope. As I spoke, my voice carried not just my story, but the stories of every woman who had been silenced, mocked, or underestimated. I spoke of betrayal, of endurance, of transformation. I spoke of how the ashes of humiliation can become the fire of rebirth. When I finished, the room erupted, not with polite applause, but with a standing ovation that thundered against the walls. Some cried, some shouted my name, and in that moment, I understood. I was no longer just Claire Miller, the wife they tried to erase. I was a symbol, a woman once dismissed, now transcending every limit they had placed on her. And as the lights blazed down, I lifted my head high, knowing this was only the beginning.